Chapter 16. The Starving Roamer. The next morning, after a breakfast of plums and coarse bread, they set out again. Maddie made Lena a place to sit at the back of the truck, between two of the crates. She took the blankets they'd slept on and spread them on the rough floor of the truck. Lena could sit on the blankets, lean against the nearest crate, and dangle her legs over the truck's back edge. The burn still hurt this morning. It was a reddish, angry-looking blister. After a while, as the sun came up and sweet, grassy smells arose from the earth, Lena began to enjoy herself again. She watched the countryside fall away behind the truck. Stretches of brown gold grass as big as the sky, trees like hairy spikes, rocky slopes. And this is how it was for 4 more days. At night, they would find a place by a stream to sleep, if they could find a stream. They passed other ox-pulled carts and trucks on their way, both going their direction and coming back. They would stop and talk with these roamers and sometimes trade with them for food. Casper always asked if they'd been to the city. Very few of them had. The ones that had been there just shook their heads when Casper asked if they'd found anything interesting. It's a waste of time to go there," they said. "Don't bother." Most of the roamers they met had been scavenging in what they called the suburbs, which Lena understood to mean towns that lay around the city. Casper and Maddie hardly spoke to her at all during the day. Around noon, they would stop the truck and get something to eat from the chest of provisions they had brought. At first, there was dried fruit, but they soon used that up. After that, it was traveler's cakes, morning, noon, and night. Casper always went to sleep right after he'd filled his belly. He laid back on the ground and snored. Then Maddie would beckon to Lena with a tilt of her head, and they would walk away from Casper and find a place to sit, often beneath a tree. One of those trees that spread their branches out like the top of a big mushroom. They would sit in the soft grass and look up at the sky through the tree's branches. Sometimes a breeze swept across the land and brought with them the scent of dusty earth and dry weeds. After lunch on their second day of traveling, Lena asked Maddie where she came from. "A horrible place," was all she said. "Horrible in what way?" "Small, cold, poor. Houses made of old boards, bad soil for growing things, never enough food. A place that was withering." "What does that mean, withering?" Lena asked. "It means shrinking and dying. Things were getting worse there. There was too much sickness, too much hunger, too much unhappiness. People were always quarreling, and a lot of them were leaving. It was ending, the place where I came from. I wanted to be somewhere that was beginning." "Our city was ending too," said Lena. She looked up at the blue sky and thought about the sky in Ember. Utter blackness, not a speck of light. No light shone anywhere in Ember now. There's no one left in our city, she said. "Sparks is a place that's beginning," said Maddie, "if it can get past the hard spots." "Hard spots?" Yes, like suddenly having to take in 400 people. "Oh," said Lena, remembering the conflicts in the village and all the reasons she wanted to get away from there. Her heart sank. "Maybe by the time we get back, that will all be over, all that trouble." "Maybe," said Maddie. "I hope so. Sparks is a whole lot better than where I came from." "I can understand why you wanted to leave that place," said Lena. "Pretty badly," said Maddie. "Bad enough to take up with a fool." "A fool?" Maddie just tipped her head towards the sleeping Casper. "You came with him just to get away?" Lena whispered. Maddie nodded. "Roamers hardly ever came out to our little settlement," she said, "mainly because we had nothing to trade. Casper was only the second one I'd ever seen. I thought I might never see another, so I grabbed the chance." "Why couldn't you just leave by yourself?" "I thought of it," Maddie said, "but I didn't know where to go. I didn't know the roads or where the settlements were. I didn't know how I'd get food. I guess I wasn't quite bold enough to go alone." When you got to Sparks, you could have stayed there," Lena said. "You didn't have to keep traveling with him." "I would have stayed," said Maddie, "if I hadn't promised to help him on this quest of his. I try to honor my promises, if I possibly can." This afternoon, as they traveled on across the rolling hills, Lena thought about places that were ending and places that were beginning. She knew about endings, but she wanted to be part of a beginning. Maybe the people of Ember could begin again in the city. If not, well, she wouldn't think about that until she had to. On the second night, they pulled up beside the ruins of a town. There wasn't much left of it, but you could see that once there had been hundreds of houses. The concrete foundation, overgrown with weeds, lined up along the curved streets. Here and there a wall or a chimney was still standing. Casper stopped the truck just beyond the outer row of ruins, and Maddie went around to the back and opened the truck that held their dwindling supply of food. They had stopped beside a ditch where a trickle of water ran. It was green, scummy water, but Lena drank it anyway. It was all there was. Casper seemed especially grouchy. His pink face was splotched and damp, and his eyes looked inflamed. He had forgotten to twist his mustache into points, and it hung down at the corners of his mouth. He dug a crumbling traveler's cake from the trunk and glowered at Maddie. "What's the matter with you anyway?" he said. "You haven't been very chatty lately." "I'm never chatty," said Maddie calmly. Casper took a savage bite of his cake. It's like traveling with a tree stump, he said. "I thought you were going to be a pleasant and helpful companion." Maddie did not reply to this. She chewed serenely, gazing out over the acres of fallen houses. Lena realized there was a certain beauty in Maddie that she hadn't seen before. Her back was straight, and she held her head high. There was something unswayable in her. The bones of her face were strong, and her gaze was firm. There was nothing fluttery about her. You could see that Casper was finding out that she was not what he'd taken her for at first. She was more than he'd bargained for. On the third day, near evening, they saw a truck coming towards them from a great distance away. They were on a long, straight road with few trees or buildings to block their view. Just the dry brown grass and a few ancient fences leaning over the flocks of birds rising, swooping through the air and fluttering down again. Up ahead came this dark dot, toiling forward. In 20 minutes or so, the trucks drew near.